Okay, and we are live today on Facebook. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live webinar from PALCUS. We are thrilled to be able to do a deep dive into the Census 2020 data. And today we're going to be talking about the consular territories of Boston, New Bedford, and Providence. Just a couple of our today's presenter, you all know her very well. You all know her very well, Dr. Dulce Maria Scott from Anderson University. She is also a PALCUS research consultant, and she does all of our analysis. And so we're really thrilled that she was able to do a deep dive into the data here. We also have special guests. We have the Consul General in Boston, Tiago Araujo, Consul General in New Bedford, Tiago Souza, and the Vice Consul in Providence, Eduardo Ramos. So to get started, I'm going to ask each consul to just share a few comments, and then we'll turn it over to Dulce to give her presentation. But one quick thing, if you have comments, if you are with us on Zoom, you can ask questions in the chat. But of course, on this Facebook Live, you can just type your questions into the live feed. We'll be monitoring that, and we will answer your questions as best we can in the live feed. If you have additional questions, you can send them to palcus@palcus.org. So to kick us off, Consul Souza, do you want to say a few words?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for this initiative and for the great research and work that you made with the census. It's very useful for us in the consulates to be aware of the characteristics of the population of our nationals. Where do they live? What are their age, their problems, their education, and so on. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Consul. And Consul Araujo.
Thank you so much. Let me start by thanking you, Angela, and Dulce for organizing this session. As you know, the Portuguese have been in this region of the US for many decades, but the community has been transforming itself greatly in these past years. It's more it's well integrated, more qualified, and it's important for us to assess the situation whenever there's new data. So that's very important, not only for the community, the community, Portuguese community itself, but for the consulate general, for us to adapt our responses, to know where the Portuguese are and what they need. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Consul Ramos. Oh, you're on mute. You have to unmute.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
There we go.
Sorry. Oh, thank you very much. I was saying both Tiagos had said everything. Glad to be here. The PALCUS outlook is more from the point of view of what do the census data mean for the political representation of Portuguese Americans. The mindset of the consular services is a bit different. So I did a couple of back of the envelope calculations based on both the 2020 census and the recent flat study on the Portuguese communities regarding marriages, languages spoken at home, and so on and so forth, which is not exactly your focus, but at some point I'd like to come in and say a few words on that.
Thank you. Yeah, and in fact, Dulce actually did bring in some of the American Community Survey data, so we do cover marriage, occupation, things like that. And Dulce is an expert at crunching the data, both for taking the ACS data and the census data, putting it together and analyzing it, and then also taking some information from the PALCUS National Index surveys, which are the only national surveys done of the Portuguese American community nationally, specifically. So not done by the census, but done by PALCUS for our community specifically. So with that, I will turn it over to Dulce and have her share her screen and share with us.
Yes. Okay. So first of all, thank you, Angela and PALCUS, for hosting this event. And thank you to the three consulates, Araujo, Ramos, and de Souza, for participating and bringing in their input and opinions as well. And so I'm going to share my screen. share the screen first, and then I will put it in presentation mode. Okay, so I will start with Census 2020 data and then move to the American Community Survey data to get the socioeconomic information about the Portuguese Americans for the 3 consular areas. We start with the area that is covered by the Boston General Council. And as you can see, there are parts of Massachusetts that are covered by the consulate. The rest of Massachusetts is covered by the New Bedford consulate. And then you have also Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And then looking at the population by state in the Boston General Consulate, you see that the majority of the population is in Massachusetts, 77.4% is in Massachusetts. And then looking at the gender and breakdown, there's more females than males. And this is common to all 3 areas and all over the United States. So I won't spend a lot of time on slides of this nature. And then I want to go into Massachusetts itself and then stop through the other states that are covered by the Boston General Consulate. And you can see that Middlesex is the state where there is the most population, the county that is, where most of the population is living. And you can look at it here. Here's Middlesex. I have a link to interactive maps, and I'm actually going to follow this one, but I will not follow them because there's a lot of them and that you'd take a lot of time. And then you can look at more detailed data by using census tracts. So the Census Bureau divides the entire United States into census tracts to allow, these are small geographies that have between 2,000 and 8,000 people. And then this allows us to do analysis at the level of the neighborhood. So I'm going to actually click out of these and go online. And you can see here Middlesex. If you click, you can see the number of people that are there. We don't have a lot of people in Franklin or Berkshire in Western Massachusetts. You can click on boundaries to add other things. I've had the congressional districts here, so you can see where the population is. Middlesex is divided between 3 congressional districts. But then if you click here, you can see a profile of the entire county for the entire population. And so I'm looking here at Middlesex County, and this is a very large county. It's one of the largest in Massachusetts. And you can see that it has over 1.6 million people. And that means that our population is about 2.4% of the total population of this county, which is not a lot. But you look at additional data that is provided, and you see that they have a very high median household income, extremely high levels of education. This is a super educated county. And then you go down and you get more data. You get their population pyramid. And then, interestingly enough, you get the ancestry, but you do not see Portuguese ancestry here, even though we are 2.4% of the population there. And this is the case for all the counties, including Bristol County, where we are over 20% of the population, including census tracts, where we are over 40% of the population. Our ancestry is not indicated. So maybe this is something that PALCUS can take on with the census.
Do we know why that is? It's just kind of an arbitrary choosing of what?
I think, well, we're not one of the largest ancestries, but this is provided by the Census Bureau. And because we're not like Germans and Irish and Italians that are really huge ancestry, they may not provide data for us, but at the same time, there might be a way that they can change their algorithms to then show the Portuguese ancestry where it is. And then if you at the census tracts, I was interested in this one here. And this tract here is in Hampton, and we really don't have a lot of people in Western Massachusetts. And so I was like, why is that group over there? And so you click on it, you can get the profile, and I already downloaded the profile. You see that it is about 6,000 people there, just over 6,000 people. And we are about, let's see, I wrote down, I think we are about 19% of the population in that census tract. You look at the median household income and the people that have bachelor's degrees or higher, it's much lower than in Middlesex County. And then you can again look at the data and you go to Ancestry. Again, we are not listed there. So I will not follow additional links to these because this takes a lot of bytes to download.
Right. I will mention, though, that these slides will be made available after the webinar, and those links to each one will be active in the PowerPoint. So for those that want to download this presentation and click on all of the links and do a deep dive into whichever counties they want, that will be available.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say, again, if you wanted to work in a specific neighborhood, start some program, and you can find the tracts that fall within your neighborhood, aggregate the data for them, and then when you apply for a grant to do that work, you can then, through the numbers, show that there is a need for your program. Now, the Census Bureau also divides these tracts into even smaller geographies, like census blocks. But for the Census 2020, they do not provide the census block data for Ancestry. I have to check if the American Community Survey, the 5-year American Community Survey does. I'm not sure at this point. So moving on, this is the breakdown of age and gender. And this is for Middlesex County only, because the Census Bureau is very careful to protect the privacy of people. And so you have to have a certain number of people in order to have all the age categories published. So they will not present all the age categories in the other counties in Massachusetts because the population is smaller. And you see here, there are elderly people, but there's not a lot of them. These ups and downs here, these might be people moving in and out of the county. I see a little bit of decline in fertility, but not that much. And then this is for 9 counties. Here, you can't compare the data across data age groups because they're not equal. And then Hampshire County, you only get 4 age categories, and then for Berkshire and Franklin, because our population is so small there, we get no data on age and gender. And so let's go to New Hampshire. And in New Hampshire, we are concentrated in Hillsborough County, but in much smaller numbers than the counties in Massachusetts. And you can look at it in the map and see that we are closer to Massachusetts than not, and maybe some of these people are maybe actually commuting for work in Massachusetts. And then more detailed information on where the population is exactly concentrated there. And then again, not a lot of older people, maybe especially from these northern states, older people move south. Again, these might represent people moving in and out of the state as well. And then Maine, and in Maine, you have Cumberland and York County with over 1,000 people, but it's a very small number of people. And then if you look at the map, this is where they concentrated on the border with New Hampshire. And then the more minute data, you can see where they are concentrated as well. Again, with the age pyramid, you don't see a lot of old people. A lot of appears to be a lot of movement in and out of the state. And then Vermont, and in Vermont, we don't have a county that has more than 1,000 people. This county here is, quite small, and when you look at it, it's this county that's the largest. And then in terms of the census tracts, we don't have a single census tract that has more than 45 people. Asian gender, because it's a small population there, we only get the 9 categories. Again, not a lot of older people there. And now I want to move to the New Bedford consular territory. And as you can see here, we are concentrated in Bristol County. Over 80% of the people are concentrated there. This is what you expected correctly, that the population would be concentrated in Bristol County. And then looking at Bristol at the map, I followed the links to the census website. The county has close to 580,000 people. And so we are at 130,617, we are about 23% of the population in that county. And then I moved to the census tracts, and in this census tract here, we have 3230. The tract as a whole has 7,837 people, which means that we are 41% of the population in that tract. But then again, our ancestry is not listed in the profile for that tract. Again, more females than males for the gender breakdown. You see a slightly higher number of older people in, this is Bristol and Plymouth that are large enough to have all the age categories. And then you see the 9 categories for Barnstable County, and then for Dukes, and we don't have any data on age and population for the Nantucket County. And so let's move to the Providence territory. And in Providence, 52.5% of the population is in Providence County. So let's look at where that is. So it includes East Providence here. And when I looked at the profile for Providence County, we are about 7% of the population in Providence County. And then I looked at this tract here in East Providence, and we are about 35% of the population in that tract. And so now I want to move on. Oh, and then this is the gender breakdown, again, more females than males. The pyramid, high percentage of people that are older, the fertility is okay. This would generate a rectangular shaped pyramid, so that's okay. Now I want to go into the ACS, or American Community Survey data, to get socioeconomic data. And I'm going to start with the entire territory for Boston. And then in the PowerPoint, I have then the data for the individual states, but I will not cover them in the presentation so that it does not become too long, so people can go and consult the slides later on for the data for the individual states. And so the first thing is that I use American Community Survey microdata. This is data that I can download and look at case by case. But unlike the decennial census data, the ACS data is based on a sample of the population rather than a count of the entire population. As such, we get estimates rather than actual population values from these data. And so because of the different methodologies, we will get different numbers when it comes to the entire population count. And the entire population count tends to be smaller for some reason in the American Community Survey data. And I know that the Census Bureau is looking into that. When we look at this table, we see that, that I'm analyzing the Portuguese American population, and that I put them into 3 categories: born in Portugal, born in other areas of the Portuguese diaspora, and I call them immigrant Luso descendants, and then the US-born Luso descendants. And they are the overwhelming majority of the population all over in all the territories, as well as all over America, with the exception perhaps of New Jersey. I think that actually the immigrant generation outnumbers the American-born generation in New Jersey. Now, when it comes to the immigrant Luso descendants that come from other areas of the Portuguese diaspora, this immigration is actually larger than it appears in the data. The reason could be that, let's say a couple goes from Portugal to Germany, and while in Germany they have children, those children then will be counted as being born in Germany. Let's say those parents then re-immigrate into the United States. The parents will be counted as being born in Portugal. The children will be counted as being born in Germany. So this includes only Luso descendants. It does not include immigration from the other areas of the Portuguese diaspora of the people that were born in Portugal. Now, when you look at these, when it comes to the percentage, the Boston consular area actually has the highest percentage of people born in Portugal, although the New Bedford consulate has a higher number of people born in Portugal. And the immigrant Luso descendants, the Boston area has the largest number of immigrant Luso descendants. And then the other thing that I want to highlight here is the ancestry. You can read the notes here, I won't go over them. But with the US-born Luso descendants, 28.2% have Portuguese ancestry on both sides of their family. And that's lower than in New Bedford and in Rhode Island, in the New Bedford territory and the Providence territory. You also have a smaller percentage that speak Portuguese at home. In the entire Boston consular area, you have 1.6% of the population that speak Portuguese. Now, that includes people that are not Portuguese. There's a lot of Brazilians that have immigrated into the area that do not consider themselves to be Portuguese. And I show here the country of birth of the people that were born in other communities of the Portuguese diaspora in other countries. And as you can see, the majority of them are from Brazil, but you also have Australia, Canada, several South American countries, France, Germany, India, Netherlands, Peru, African countries, Russia, and so forth. So it is a very diverse population. And that's why, in addition to Portuguese, Portuguese Americans speak several other languages at home. And here I have data on education and on income. And as you can see, the people born in Portugal have the lowest level of education, but this is much higher than for New Bedford, the New Bedford area and the Providence area. The immigrant Luso descendants are doing well, so are the Portuguese Luso descendants, although it's slightly lower than for the entire consular area, for the entire population there. Now, when it comes to immigrant Luso descendants, this is different from the nation as a whole. In the nation as a whole, immigrant Luso descendants have much higher levels of education than do the US-born Luso descendants. Then the next thing that I looked at was median wages or salaries. And two things about these. One is that I present the data as median. So that means that among US-born Luso descendants, half of them have wages or salaries that are higher than this number, and half of them have wages and salaries that are lower than that number. Now, another thing here is that it includes people that are very young, and it includes people that are older than 15, and they still making very low wages. So this is, this is going to be lower just because of that. But then when you look at the median family income, now this is families The census also gives household income, and households include all kinds of people, not just families. So the family income tends to be higher than the household income. And you see that US-born Luso descendants are outperforming everybody else here, which it's a good thing, I guess. And then when it comes to occupation, in terms of occupation, the first row includes the vast American white-collar middle-class occupations in stable forms of employment, and for which education is needed, although not for all of them. This includes people like professors, doctors, scientists, lawyers, business owners, managers, administrators, and you don't have to be an administrator of a very large business in order to be included here, medium administrative positions, and you can be an administrator of a small business and be included there. And then the last two rows are the traditional blue-collar immigrant occupations, and you do see a higher percentage of people born in Portugal in this type of occupation, the blue-collar areas, because our immigration basically was directed to the blue-collar sector of the economy. And then when it comes to immigrant Luso descendants, there's a higher percentage concentrated in the services. So the services include things like cleaning, home aids, health aids, restaurants, hotels, all that sort of thing. And then when you look at the US-born Luso descendants, although they're slightly lower than the rest of the people in the consular area, they are doing quite well. So let's move on. There's two things going on in this table. The first is to show the percentage of the population that is elderly, and we define elderly as 65 and over. And the Boston area has the second largest number of elderly, but the smallest percentage overall of elderly. And because the Census Bureau generally provides education data for people that are 25 years or over, I did not indicate data for them here. But you can see that as the population ages, the level of education declines very rapidly. And so one of the things that I was trying to test with this is whether, initially when Portuguese Americans came after the 1958 wave, there were plenty of factory jobs, and then they'd take the children from school at 16 and put them in the factories. And then in the 1980s, deindustrialization in the Northeast started, and all over the United States as well. And so that then starting in the 1980s, that they would have given more priority to education. And it does appear that this is the case. This is a huge level of education. This is 10 percentage points higher than the average for the state. And keep in mind that for all Americans, it's 35% of them have a bachelor's degree or higher. So this is really high for this population. Now, there's a very sharp decline by age, which then leads me to believe as well that there may be movement of people from the other congressional areas, particularly the New Bedford area, in north towards Boston, where there are more job opportunities, more high-paying job opportunities. So we're going to see the data for the New Bedford consulate, and the same trend happens, that education declines with age, but it's not as sharp a decline as it is here. But we won't know for sure unless we do a survey, an individual survey. And then I provided data for Massachusetts, and I'm not going to stop on it. This is for people to just Massachusetts, the state. But I just want to point out how huge their family income is compared to the rest of the categories for the Luso descendants, that is. And then I also provide, just for Massachusetts, I provide an indication of of the elderly are by Puma, but only for the Pumas that have 1,000 people or more. So you might ask me, what is a Puma? As I mentioned before, the Census Bureau is very careful to protect people's privacy. And since we can download this data that I'm using it and look at it case by case, they decided that they can only allow us to see geographies that have around 100,000 people. So a Puma has about around 100,000 people, much larger than a tract. And so you can see where they are, but I can provide you with data for all the other Pumas. There's many of them in the Massachusetts congressional area. And then I'm going to skip through all the data that I provided individually for each of the other states that are covered by the Boston Consulate. And then I am going to move on to the New Bedford Consular Territory. So we look here, this is the highest number for the New Bedford, the highest number of people born in Portugal and also a highest percentage. There aren't a lot of immigrant Luso descendants, a much smaller number than in the Boston area. And then the percent of single ancestry is much higher in the New Bedford consular area than it is in the other, in Boston and also in Providence. And also you have a larger number of people that speak Portuguese at home among the Luso descendants, and then a higher percentage of people in the entire county that speak Portuguese, including Brazilians and others who do not consider themselves to be Portuguese. Looking at where the Luso descendants are coming from, again, the majority are from Brazil, but you also have Bermuda, Germany, Africa, United Kingdom, and Venezuela. And here you see that the level of education for those born in Portugal is extremely low. And it's a little higher for immigrant Luso descendants. That's not too bad. It's not very good for the US-born Luso descendants, which is leading me to think that the people that get education move out of the area, either to Boston, the Boston area, or to other states. I did look at other states, and there were quite a bit of people from Providence and Massachusetts moving to Florida and Texas, but that's for a future study. Nevertheless, the US-born Luso descendants are doing quite well when it comes to family income, and you can see the wages. And then they are at lower levels in the professional areas of the economy compared to all people in the consular area. The immigrant Luso descendants are concentrated in the services, and then you have still a very high percentage of those born in Portugal concentrated in the blue-collar areas. And then you see again the same decline of education as age increases, but this is 25%, whereas in Boston, this was like over 55%. So again, that is what leads me to believe that people from this area are moving north. But as I said before, only an individual survey would allow us to determine that. And then where the elderly are concentrated, again, there's a lot more of them here than in the Boston area. And you see that it is in Taunton, in Fall River, and New Bedford. And now let's move to Providence. And again, you have a high percentage of people born in Portugal, but it's a lower number. There's very few immigrant Luso descendants in the Providence area. And the single ancestry among Luso descendants is 43.2%. That's higher than Boston, but lower than New Bedford. And then 8.4% speak Portuguese at home. And that's higher than Boston, lower than New Bedford. And then for the states, 2.3% of the population speak Portuguese at home. And then where are the Luso descendants coming from? Here, there's some coming from Cabo Verde and Bermuda, Brazil, other African areas. And then looking at wages and salaries, they are lower in terms of, no, not lower. Oh no, let's start with the education. Born in Portugal, they have very low levels of education. The immigrant Luso descendants also have extremely low levels of education. This breaks the pattern for Luso descendants all over the country. The US-born Luso descendants have, it's okay compared with the national percentage of 35%. And when it comes to the family incomes, nevertheless, the US-born Luso descendants are doing better than all the other populations. And then again, in the professional areas, we have a much lower concentration. The immigrant Luso descendants are highly concentrated in services and sales. And again, the people born in Portugal have a higher percentage in the blue-collar occupations. And we see the same pattern with education, that as age increases, there is less education, lending credence to the hypothesis that indeed Portuguese people, although initially they took their children out of school, they now encourage education. And this is where the elderly people are concentrated in Providence, the Providence area. And so that's it. Before we go on, do you have any comments before we go on to look at the foreign-born population? Okay.
Well, Dulce, thank you so much. On my side, I just wanted to point out I think the investment in the education of younger generations, that is very important for the Portuguese in this region. Massachusetts is a state with some of the best universities in the world, and it's good to know that the Portuguese are accompanying that evolution in qualification.
Yes. Okay. All right. So let's move on. I thought that the foreign-born population, both born in Portugal and in other countries of the Portuguese that have a Portuguese diaspora communities, it'd be important for the consulate, because these might be populations that require more consular services. And so I started with the ability to speak English, and you see that there are people that either do not speak English well or do not speak it at all. So this is the population that may need assistance navigating the mainstream socioeconomic and educational institutions of American society, not only linguistically, but also culturally. And then I looked at the year of entry for the population, and in the Boston consular area, the earliest persons immigrated to the United States in 1939, and there's several that came in the 1940s. Of course, people that came in these earlier decades may not be alive anymore, but you see that the number peaks in the 1960s and 1970s, and then begins to decline. For the immigrant Luso descendants, they begin to arrive at a later date, and then their number peaks in 2000 to 2009 and 2010 to 2019. And then I went into citizenship, and there are a lot of people that are not citizens yet. The percentage is higher among the US-born, the immigrant Luso descendants. And I think it has to do with the fact that some of them arrived more recently, and as such, they have not had time to get citizenship in the US. It takes at least 5 years. Then moving on, this is again in Massachusetts, the same as everybody else, but I presented the data for Massachusetts here. Everybody else in the rest of the Boston general consular area. And this is where people are. I only highlighted PUMAs that have 500 individuals or more who do not speak English. And then for New Bedford, you see again that there are still people that don't speak English well and not at all. Then let's move on. And they are in Fall River, mostly in Fall River and New Bedford, basically. And then for New Bedford, the first person that's still alive today came in 1943. And then you see the same thing that it peaks in the 1960s, 1970s, and then it declines. Again, the same pattern with the immigrant luso-descendants. They start later, and then it peaks between 2000 and 2010. And there are a lot of people that are not citizens, but you see that the percentage is, again, higher among the people that were born in other areas of the Portuguese diaspora and then immigrated to the United States, again, because it's a more recent immigration. And then in Providence, you also see that there are people that don't speak English well or at all. It seems to be a smaller percentage than in the other territories. This is where they are in the PUMAs. And then in Providence, I believe the first person that's there arrived in 1949, and it's still alive today. And again, you see the peak in 70s, again, same pattern for the immigrant population. But what is interesting about Providence is that there's, in the last 3 years, no one has come to Rhode Island, either from Portugal or from Portuguese immigrant communities in other countries. And then a pretty high rate of people that are not citizens yet, much higher for those born in other areas of the Portuguese diaspora. And basically, this is what I have. I'm just going to summarize the main takeaways. So the first distinction between the three areas is that the New Bedford consulate has the most Portuguese Americans, followed by Boston and then by Providence. In terms of individuals born in Portugal, again, the New Bedford consulate has the highest number, followed by Boston and then Providence. Among the US-born Luso-descendants, the populations served by the New Bedford and the Providence consulates have a higher prevalence of people of single ancestry, 52.4% and 43.2%, compared to 28% for the Boston consular area. So this might be a population that needs additional consular services, in as much as they have a higher degree of proximity to the immigrant generation. Some of them may own property in Portugal that they inherited from parents and so forth. And then in terms of the elderly Portuguese, New Bedford, the New Bedford area stands out with the highest number of and percentage of elderly Portuguese. And you can see the numbers here. And then in terms of education, there are vast differences between the Boston consulate and the other two. And you can, as you can see, the level of education is 43.4%. Again, I remind people that the national level is 35%. And similarly, people in the Boston area are making much higher wages. And then when it comes to occupation, people are in the Boston area are much more concentrated in the professional middle class areas, the white collar areas of the economy. So we speculated that these disparities between these consular areas may have to do with people initially not emphasizing education and then beginning to emphasize education after the 1980s, but then perhaps the people who got educations in the New Bedford consulate area and to some extent the Providence consulate area moving away for better job opportunities, including to Boston. And then regarding English proficiency, Rhode Island has the smallest numerical count, but the highest percentage among the three consular areas of Portuguese Americans facing difficulties in the English language. in terms of of entry to the United States, immigrants from Portugal show the highest number arriving in the 60s and 70s in all consular areas. The immigrant Luso descendants began arriving later than those in Portugal, with their numbers peaking in the first decade of the 2000s. Immigration into Rhode Island has experienced a significant decline, with no immigrants arriving from either Portugal or other areas of the Portuguese diaspora since the year 2020. And finally, the rate of US citizenship is higher among those born in Portugal compared to those born in other areas of the Portuguese diaspora. And this variance could be attributed to the fact that the immigrants born in the other areas of the diaspora are of a more recent influx. Okay, and I stopped here. Angela, do you have PowerPoints that you want to?
Well, first, we can see if there are any questions or if any of the consuls have any comments. From my own observation, I think one of the most stark stats is that there is no immigration into Rhode Island at all in the past 3 years. I think there's an assumption that at least a few people have come, even if they are coming for a PhD or for work or something like that. Because I mean, I think you'll agree that there's been a trend across all consular territories that the immigration has declined. But even in California, we have people that have already come either with an education, so they're seeking a higher degree, or they already have an education and they've gotten a job over here or something like that, right? And so, but they still count as immigrants, so it might be significantly less. So I don't know if Consul Ramos has any thoughts on that, but I thought that was pretty amazing.
I do have thoughts on that very, very briefly. Yes, it's true that the immigration, I don't know if the number would be strictly zero, but immigration from Portugal to Rhode Island is decreasing significantly, and to the extent that there is, it's mobility rather than immigration in the classical sense of the word. People who come here because they have a job in a multinational, or they spend a couple of years in Brown University and then go back to Portugal or somewhere else. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple of decades we would see with the Portuguese or Portuguese American community the same thing we saw 40, 50 years ago, or I didn't see, whoever was here saw 40, 50 years ago, with the Portuguese, Irish Americans, Italian Americans, and French Americans, which were very distinct communities back in those days, and now they are completely absorbed by the ecosystem. I think the Portuguese Americans is going to happen the same thing. Paradoxically, however, although the classical Portuguese community type community is dwindling, the demand for Portuguese citizenship is increasing. And that has to do with the fact that many people realize that their grandparents, or they are married with somebody whose grandparents came from the Azores, for instance, and because of that, they want to have an European passport, which is a nice thing to have. And at the same time, the fact that in the last 10 years or so, the general image and visibility of Portugal in America changed a lot for the better, and people whose Portuguese heritage was indifferent or maybe even feared as a factor of potential negative discrimination is not there anymore. So people are demanding Portuguese nationality more and more. The consular services here in Providence have been increasing at a 15-20% rate a year since the end of the pandemic, as the immigration is decreasing. So that's an important factor. Thank you.
That is true, that because being Portuguese no longer leads anyone to be discriminated against, then there's nothing to lose by identifying as Portuguese and by connecting to Portugal in one way or another. In fact, there is something to gain, that valuable European passport.
Yeah, it's interesting. You made the comparison to, how, what the Portuguese community might look like, may follow the same path as the Italian Americans and Irish Americans. Yeah, I would say, the one difference is that even though those communities have been completely integrated into American mainstream, there is still St. Patrick's Day nationally.
Right.
There is still a very well-known common awareness of Italian food and Italian cultural elements, right? We're kind of in that gray area where, yes, Portugal is becoming more popular, but Dia de Portugal or Portugal Day is still only celebrated by Portuguese communities, right? It's not like every city in the country, marks June 10th and has happy hour for Portugal Day like they do for St. Patty's Day. So I think I guess it depends on what the community wants as well. Do we want that? Or do we not want that? I don't know. And I think the community would probably be divided on that discussion. But I think there is an opportunity for us to make a stronger presence so that we do have sort of a lasting legacy, if you will, right? And that the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth generations still have something to connect to in 50 years, right? Because the Italian Americans and the Irish Americans, a lot of those folks, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 generations, right? But they're still holding on to that element of their culture.
And there are people that are 1/5 and 1/6 Portuguese that have rediscovered their Portuguese ancestry.
Yes, that's true.
And they travel quite a bit to Portugal to go see where their Portuguese ancestors are from. And then they fall in love with it. And
right.
Back.
Right.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say services such as Ancestry.com and 23andMe have helped people really discover that they are Portuguese and they didn't know, or that they're more Portuguese than they thought they were. So that's been fun.
I have had people contact me saying exactly that. Oh, I didn't know I was Portuguese until I took the test. And we have ancestors in common. Can we try to see where they connect? And it's kind of difficult to do that.
On the question of education and salary, occupation, it certainly seems that it's not only a matter of geography within a consular area, right? So like, as you pointed out, in Boston, higher levels of education, higher salaries. It's a major city, a metropolitan area.
Not higher salaries, higher family income.
Oh, okay. Important distinction, right? Yeah.
Well, in wages and salaries, they are at the same level as everybody else in Boston. But when it comes to just Portuguese American families are doing extremely well.
And that's
everybody else.
And that's great. And, I think, but from an education standpoint, as we plan our programming, as a national organization, or even as the consular networks kind of figure out where do they put their efforts, promoting education and higher education is still very important to encourage. I don't know if anyone has any comments on that, but I know that a lot of effort is being put into whether it's study abroad programs or scholarships or, things to encourage young Portuguese Americans to seek higher education and seek out, higher careers.
As well as learning Portuguese, right?
Yes, that was going to be my next comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a question in the way the census are made here in the United States. If I'm not mistaken, it's there is the concept of race, which is very strange for us in Portugal. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in order to identify as Portuguese, you need first to choose that you're white. Is that correct?
No, not
or
at all.
It used to be like that, maybe. I don't know.
No, Angela, you can take it.
So I think you're more the expert on how things used to be, but in the decennial census for 2020, you could choose any and as many races as you wanted. So you could choose white and black, you could choose white and Asian, you could choose Asian and black, you could choose Hispanic. I mean, you could choose any combination that you identified with, and then also write in Portuguese as an ethnicity, and you would be counted as Portuguese, because I think we all know that our community has integrated into other communities, right? And so we have a lot of Portuguese that are maybe half, a quarter, an eighth Portuguese because, they've married into other groups. But yes, so I think this was the first year that we were able to provide such a varied response to the ethnicity question, race and ethnicity question, because it also allowed people to write in multiple ethnicities. So you could write in Portuguese and Puerto Rican and Japanese if you wanted, right? If you had any combination of ethnic backgrounds, you could write in, I think it was up to 7 duels. Is that correct? Or something like that?
I don't
remember.
I don't think there was a limit actually. But yes, the issue of race has been emphasized in the United States because initially, when there was slavery, slaves were counted as 3/4 of a person, something like that. And nowadays, race and ethnicity is used for redistricting. The census is done basically to count the population and then decide how many representatives in Congress each state has, and then as states lose population or increase in population, they may gain or lose districts. And then the census data is used to do that reapportionment and redistricting process. And because our politics are very racialized, they want to draw the districts in such a way that, you know, maybe they spread out the races through different districts, or they draw them in such a way as to include a race so that they can have some representation in Congress. And that's why it's such a big part of the census.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Of course. And then when it comes to Portuguese language, yes. So any further thoughts on that you'd like to share, Dulce? I know that it's something that we focus on as well, and are trying to get more schools to have Portuguese as a class, like, you know, in public schools, not just the community schools.
Well, first of all, when the measure that the Census Bureau uses is, the indicator is to measure the degree of linguistic assimilation of the immigrant population. It's not to measure how many people speak a given language in the United States. So it does not give us a complete picture of how many people speak Portuguese in the United States. The figure is likely much higher than that. For example, I speak Portuguese, but I don't speak it at home because my husband is not Portuguese. And likewise, there's a lot of people that are in my situation as well. And then the second thing about Portuguese spoken at home is that it may be a limited level of vocabulary, because the vocabulary that we use at home is very limited compared to the vocabulary that we use professionally. And so when people say that they speak Portuguese at home, we really don't know to what level of proficiency they speak. But the other thing I wanted to say is that learning in a classroom 3 times a week is not enough for people to gain proficiency in a language. And so the way to increase that will have to be with immersion in a Portuguese-speaking country, either Portugal or another country where the official language is Portuguese, and not for just a small period of time, for an extended period of time. It takes about 3 years of immersion in order to dominate a language, well, depending on what your level to begin with is. So I think this is where Portugal could come in and provide these opportunities. And I think that Portugal is already providing a lot of opportunities, not only for Portuguese American students, but for other students that are learning Portuguese as a foreign language. In fact, there's more students that are learning it as a foreign language than students that are learning it as a heritage language. And so continuing with that, but a month in the summer, that's not enough. They need to stay for much longer periods of time in Portugal.
Can I also comment on that?
Yeah.
Yes. I'd like to add, of course, that it's always challenging in a community that is very well integrated in the American society, and when the number of Portuguese born is declining in percentage of the total. But in any case, the interest in the Portuguese language is growing, and we've been supporting the teaching of Portuguese all over the US. Of course, the number of students learning Portuguese in the US, the whole of the US, I think it's around 20,000 in the public schools, and of those, around half, 10,000 students learn Portuguese in schools in Massachusetts, integrated in their curricula. So I think that helps. In any case, it's always challenging, in particular when there's no families of no not of a single ancestry, not only Portuguese ancestry. It's difficult to maintain the language, but we try to support the teaching of Portuguese.
And when you say that it is growing, you're saying it's growing not just among Portuguese Americans, but among all Americans that are more interested in learning Portuguese, right? And we need,
yes,
right?
Yes,
That's
not only
right?
Portuguese. I think because as you mentioned, the number of new arrivals of Portuguese arriving in the US is declining. But for instance, the number of Brazilians arriving
Right.
in the US, in Massachusetts in particular, is growing, and we have also a significant Cape Verdean community. So that helps us have sufficient numbers to be able to ask schools to have Portuguese taught their curricula. But not only that, but even on the part of Americans with no links to Portugal or the Portuguese language, there's a greater interest, not only in the language, but in the country. I think that's positive.
Yeah, in fact, I can speak for California just based on some information given to me by Denise Borges, who's not only an honorary consul in California, but also a teacher of Portuguese at both the high school and college levels, that at least at Fresno State, he has more Hispanic students in his Portuguese classes than he has Portuguese students. And the thought there is that, the Spanish students already speak Spanish fluently, so taking a Spanish class is kind of useless for them. And so now they have an opportunity to become bilingual or trilingual, and it's an easy transition from Spanish to Portuguese, right? And so there could, there's an argument to be made about making some partnerships with the Hispanic community and getting Spanish teachers to be certified to teach Portuguese as well. But then you brought up a good point, Tiago, about Brazilians and Cape Verdeans, and I think we need to be better aligned with those communities as well when making our case to have Portuguese offered in schools. So I think there's some work to do there.
And for a lot of these people, the immigrants from the other areas of the Portuguese diaspora, Portuguese is their first language. So they come in already with proficiency in Portuguese. And that's why I think overall it appears that speaking of Portuguese is increasing in the United States, but it's because of these new immigrants, not because of not because Luso descendants are learning it more, or because there's more people immigrating from Portugal, which they aren't. So
right. Well, we have exceeded our hour, but I think we could probably talk for another couple of hours on all the different aspects, and I think we'll be doing a few more deep dives into other consular areas, such as the West Coast. And perhaps the DC embassy area, because they sort of pick up the slack for everywhere else. But go ahead.
Although those cover more states, they're actually going to be easier to do because
it's fewer people.
Massachusetts was divided into two consular areas made the analysis more difficult, because I had to analyze at the county level and at the Puma level rather than at the state level. So, none of the other states are divided, right?
Right. Well, and it's funny because, so California does have the largest technically number of Portuguese, right? And it's a very large state. When number 2 is Massachusetts, and California and Massachusetts. So it's like, such a small state, is
so
it's on the heels.
Divided and the other one isn't. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, only actually more so that we're really spread out in California, and so I think the assimilation into mainstream is even more, right, and we're even more invisible out here, and so it's a whole other conversation. But yeah, why is it divided? I think probably just as a way to handle the volumes of people. You need 2 consuls to address such a concentrated amount. But our poor consul in San Francisco has 11 states, so he racks up the miles.
He's overwhelmed, right?
Yes, he racks up the miles for sure. So I just wanted to share some closing slides here. Let's see. Oops. not that one, that one. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our three consuls. Thank you to Dulce. You, as always, do a phenomenal job in crunching the data and giving us some insights into our community. And as PALCUS, the national organization, we are thrilled to be able to host these webinars. And if you did enjoy this webinar and found it useful, we encourage you to become a PALCUS member, because it is our membership dues that really helps us to continue to do this kind of work. And there are actually quite a few benefits to being a member. Of course, you get lots of content from us in forms of newsletters, and there's members only newsletters that you may not know about. You're able to be featured in our member spotlight in our monthly newsletter. You get priority when to be featured in our business network newsletter. You can participate in our Portuguese language groups, which we have launched, and they are held weekly. So if you need to practice your Portuguese, in addition to the classes that you're taking, you can have a discussion in Portuguese every week with us. There are members only events. You get some cool swag. And then, for me, the biggest benefit of all is that you are supporting the national organization serving our national community. So thank you so much to everyone. We look forward to having you on again and joining us on our next webinar. Until next time. Obrigada.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.